I've been nerding out over propeller-driven aircraft recently, and looking into a history of a number of vehicles. No, there's no upcoming vehicles reviews on aircraft on jacks. If you want that kind of stuff, look at Rex's hangar. Ultimately, I've been looking at the usefulness of War Thunder's propeller-driven gameplay. You know, even when you've got high-tech missile slinging, jet-filled, War Thunder battlefield, whatever, there's something simple just going back to propeller-driven aircraft, and I'm wondering why this isn't more of a popular thing. Is it because, well, propeller-driven aircraft have been in the game for 70 years, or have they been outdated, relegated to the past, over-compressed, and probably not as useful as you think? Well, you know, there are some serious things that I think context and key is missing here, because unlike jets, well, they can go fast, and props win with knife fights. At least they did in the older days. But before we get anywhere, make sure you go get my decal, link in the description. It'll be going away in a couple of months, pending approval from Galjan on a new decal. Now, I'm not really a fan of high-tier gameplay. There are channels out there that have thrived since the addition of Fox 3, but ever since I've seen that happen, you know, how naive were we to think that the pre-Fox 3 meta was really sort of the way that War Thunder gameplay was supposed to be. I'm not adverse to the missile gameplay style, the fast-paced action, but it does lack a little bit of incentive, and you often get more reward by playing a lower tier aircraft than you get by playing a higher tier. Of course, I'm not talking about sim, I'm not talking about enduring confrontation, just purely in air realistic battles. And of course, if you want to go to an air arcade, well, that's a separate situation altogether, but for the most part, jets go fast and props win with knife fights. Essentially, propeller aircraft, especially those from World War II, typically operate at lower speeds, you know, 200 kilometers to 600. This is where turn radius and energy retention and the all-important angle of attack become critical in close quarters dogfights. So, this is obviously depending on vehicles, because it feels like the World War II vehicles and even the super prop era of War Thunder tends to be a lot heavier and a lot more refined. And what I mean by that is Galjan is messing with a lot of the weights and a lot of the flight models in ways that often don't benefit a lot of the aircraft. Plus, there's a lot of BR decompression, so your battle ratings and your various other things often end up by being a little more cluttered. As you get into the early jet age, there isn't really an incentive for you to stay at these vehicles, because the whole entire point of the game is to push you straight up to the top end vehicle without having to worry about grinding any of these lowly, you know, little horrible machines. I'll give you an example. The P-51's rudder has been heavily nerfed. It does feel a bit heavy. Machine guns keep getting changed. The damage model's constantly tweaked. How many times has the Focke-Wulf D13 had its flight model changed? Hundreds of times. But anyway, I'm going to go on a tangent here. It would be nice if we could skip the whole climbing sort of side of things and spawn at an altitude where everybody spawns, like for example some jets do. But again, that's not necessarily the case. You know, most prop planes in War Thunder, especially bombers and interceptors, get air spawns, placing them above most of the action, and the altitude can be converted into kinetic energy or speed or a positional advantage. And yeah, I know not every aircraft should have an air spawn. Like, they removed a good chunk of vehicles like the XP-50 from, well, having its air spawn for the sole reason that it was out climbing absolutely everything. So again, balance is key, but where there's balance, there's also a high likelihood that they would over-nerf a vehicle, reduce rewards, increase repair costs, increase battle rating, increase the empty weight, so to speak, by placing an invisible 500 kilogram bomb under an aircraft, and it just gets and compounds the issue even further. So why am I specifically talking about propeller-driven aircraft? Because I do enjoy playing boom and zoom tactics, although they don't necessarily work all the time. These days I do find it's very rare that you actually do have a proper boom and zoom or even a dogfighting capability. You know, stuff like the P-47 and the Focke-Wulf D13, you know, they're decent at boom and zoom with excellent dive speeds, but, you know, jets, compared to jets, I don't know. Jets are fast and they often bleed energy, but you can't necessarily do the same thing and apply that, because now you've got the missile meta. Unfortunately, it's the same sort of core aspects that I keep coming back to. Props can turn, jets can't, unless you get a specific type of jet like a G91 or even various other things. But My main focus, at least when I was doing my apprenticeship, was on aviation engines, commercial jet turbines, and I don't find those as interesting as the propeller-driven aircraft. There is something about the sound, the smell, if you've ever seen a rotary aircraft or a massive cylindered aircraft as well, you would absolutely love the sights, the sounds, the smells, and that's what gets me. I get other people have that about F-16s and F-22s, and I have a feeling it equates to, old man yelling at the clouds, but in this case, it's kids who used to watch the Spitfire when they were young, idolise the Spitfire, the newest, greatest thing, the newest, flashiest car, the speed, power, all that kind of stuff. And I somewhat get it at a lower level. Like, the technology is amazing, but there's something about going back to basics that you just can't beat. While I'm waiting for the last enemy to show up, we're doing a bit of ground pounding in a fighter. Not the most ideal scenario, but it works. And while most people don't tend to dogfight anymore because most battles are either head-on, direct, sort of indirect fighting, and everybody's either low on the deck or some people have climbed, the whole entire matchmaker, at least what I'm noticing in terms of random lobbies, tends to be a mix of just incredibly random and varied things, where sometimes there's only one or two people of your team that are climbing, whereas the rest of your team tends to be filled up with ground attackers or bombers, for example. But the thing that I fly props for is mainly nostalgia. War Thunder allows you to create semi-realistic world battles, and playing in matchups where you at least ideally think, although mixed gameplay in terms of, nations versus nations, the mixed arcade sort of realistic nature does detract from gameplay, but it doesn't remove things. And I think Guardian's excuse to limit matchmaker at the moment because they want to get everybody in queues as quickly as possible into, matches doesn't make sense. I would love to have a nation by nation lineup, and that way you can feel like you're playing as a part of some sort of historical matchup. That's kind of why I play props. I enjoy that. I don't enjoy the 5 minutes of sitting on my phone waiting for the aircraft to climb, but that's another story altogether. Ultimately, why props are still fantastic is maneuverability. Superior below 600 kilometers an hour. Now, you climb an altitude, excellent, especially with an air spawn. TLDR, not exactly always accurate. You've got a decent ground attack platform, so it's close air support, they're stable, precise. I get you can get, dedicated warheads and various other bits and pieces you can strap on a modern jet, like AGMs and various other things. But, economically wise, there's nothing wrong with having a bomb truck on a P-47 and going out and obliterating a couple of tanks. But there's nothing wrong with jet gameplay. There's nothing wrong with prop gameplay. There are things I'd love to fix. There are things that everybody wishes that they would address. Ultimately, this game is 12 years old, coming up soon, or something like that, and it is imperative that they do something to the core gameplay. It seems that they have decided to instead split off Sim into their new Aces of Thunder game, which is supposed to be a VR exclusive, although rumours have it that you can actually use a hands-on throttle and stick with that game, and thus defeats the point of having VR controls where you manipulate the controls in-game via a VR device. But Aces of Thunder is a separate subject. War Thunder is getting old. It is. And it really needs to innovate in some areas. Maybe bring back historical matches. Maybe bring back various other things. I'd love to see the fuel slider actually work, and thus for certain aircraft I can go below 30 minutes fuel, because some fighter aircraft you can't, some fighters you can. I just like more customization, more options. It allows for a better gameplay for everybody, and then maybe some BR decompression. And I don't want to see Wyverns. I don't want to see Ju-88s, specifically the 288, and I don't want to see A2Ds, but Super Prop gameplay is really condensed. It's sort of early jets. You get really high up in terms of the battle ratings. It can be quite annoying. I just think that there are lots of opportunities, and propeller-driven aircraft give me sort of a nostalgia hit that jets don't, even though I am exploring and playing some of the jets at the moment, specifically the F-106. Anyway, long-winded rounds over. Are you still playing props? Let me know in the comments down below why not. And if you have any video suggestions or video ideas, please let me know in the comments down below. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. Little quick sort of look at propeller-driven aircraft, I suppose. I love it. I love prop aircraft. That's my forte. Jets, we'll get there soon.